Welcome to another segment of provocative conversations destined to provoke further thought and spark greater questions regarding God, church, and the religious establishments of both the past and the present. I am the proud heretic, Mr. Provocateur himself. Hello. I want to begin my message. I gave you the introduction on the divine season of the pandemic. Now I want to go into further detail, into the opening details of this message or these messages. This is a combination of messages. I will, in this recording, speak initially regarding two particular points or two particular messages that God gave me back on February the 26th, 2020, and on March the 13th, 2020. I will speak roughly regarding these two messages. I will hit portions of these messages regarding the pandemic season. I will start off by saying, do I think that this present pandemic period is a divine period? And the answer is unequivocally or inequivocally, however you say it, yes. Yes, this is all God. This is all the hand of God. If you ever believed in a Satan, well, this is your period to determine for yourself whether or not there is a Satan. If you ever believe that there was a Satan, in which I do not believe that there is a Satan, he does not believe that there is a Satan? No, I do not believe that there is a Satan. That is a message within itself. But no, I do not believe that there is a Satan. I'm sorry that you're shocked, but I must tell you, I believe that the love of God and the grace and goodness of God is all about God, not about God and Satan. However, if you want to believe that there is a Satan factor, which is a message that I am coming to sharing with you as time progresses. But one thing God told me regarding this pandemic period, this pandemic season, is that only the words that are relevant to this season will be, received in and during this season. There are a lot of people speaking words that are wholesome and they have their place, and many of them are founded in principle. But you're not relative. Those messages are not relative to this season. Those messages tend to whitewash tombstones. Those messages tend to send a twisted message. When you don't speak regarding the period, the cycle in time in which you are presently, then you will begin to speak things that, even though they are true within themselves, within their essence, they aren't true within the times that you are currently in. You're speaking true messages out of time. It's almost like the children of Israel did with Jeremiah. How they would speak, Jeremiah would come to speak a message, and then they would come behind Jeremiah and they would speak a different message. Jeremiah would be saying what the heart of God is saying, and then those others would be saying messages that were either pertaining to a time period of the past that they are no longer in. And so they were speaking peace from periods past in the current period that they were in with Jeremiah, which caused them to be out of line with where the heart and breathedness of God was presiding. Or they were just making up messages, conjuring up messages. Maybe I shouldn't say or, I should say and, because it was both. They were conjuring up messages that they were speaking from their own hearts, talking about peace, peace, when there is no peace, says the Lord. I could go a little further and say there is no peace, says the Lord, to the wicked. You say, well, amen. Yeah, but the people that I'm calling wicked may not be the people that you would be referring to as being wicked. See, I don't see the people out here in the so-called world as though I'm not in the world as well, as though you aren't in the world as well, as though the church is not in the world as well. We are all in the church. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that only because I want to get technical, because I'm taking away that terminology. We are all in God. If there is a truth in the Christedness of God, we are all in the Christedness of God. We are not, this is not a us camp and a them camp, our camp and then their camp, us and then the world and then the church and then us. You know, the church wouldn't consider me to be a part of them anyway. So the church and then us. No, that is not what this is about. This is so far advanced in that. But let me get back to what I was saying, because I'm jumping already. I'm starting to jump. I'm not pacing myself. I got to pace myself, and I can't necessarily remember where I was. But we got to be careful that we do not speak peace before we speak balance. We often want to speak peace and to speak certain type messages before we speak forth balance. And most of all, before we speak forth the very heartbeat of God. In the very heartbeat of God, in the heart of God, there is peace. But in the very heartbeat of God, there may be some disruptions. There may be some pandemics. And we don't want to speak forth the truths of the pandemic, and we definitely don't want to incorporate or include the pandemic to anything of God. So we want to believe in a Satan. But if you want to believe in a Satan, I will say to you, in the believing of a Satan, whoever this Satan is in your perception, in your theology, that's all he is in your perception, in your theology. If you want to keep him and include him in your perception and in your theology, then your concept of Satan is still working toward the purposes and plans of God for your life. So Satan is not your enemy, but rather Satan is your, how would I say? He's not your acquaintance, but you are very well acquainted with him. Most of you in the church are. He's not your constituent, because he shouldn't be hanging out with you like that. But if you have made him your constituent, then it is what it is. He's more like your butler. He's more like God's butler. He's more like God's chauffeur. He's not this enemy, this entity. He's not an enemy against the purposes and plans of God. He's an assistant, if that's how you want to see him. But what I do is exclude him out of. Yeah, well, if you can exclude him all you want, you're saying the Bible is a lie. No, I'm not saying the Bible is a lie, though I am saying that a lot that's in the Bible is a lie, is not the truth. Anything that's not the truth is a lie. Now, perhaps what makes something that is untrue a lie is the motive or the intent for why something was stated anyway that makes it a lie. I don't know if a person with proper intention and proper motive, if he speaks something that's not true, if that's truly a lie, or is that truly a misstatement? I'm not sure. Bottom line is, if you want to believe in a Satan, you believe in him. But I choose to believe God and God only. You believe in the Greek mythologies that Bible is filled with in certain areas. You believe in that. You believe in the pushings of man. That's why we are where we are. That's why the church is where it is right now, because of the pushings and teachings of man, about man, claiming something about God. If it sounds twisted, it's because it is. So when I deal with wickedness, I deal with twistedness, twisted thinking. Okay. This pandemic period is a divine period in which God has already orchestrated what will and shall be done through this period. This was not a period that we walked into, though we did progress into this period. This was a period that was set aside for us, set aside for the time period that we're in. When I use the word divine, the word divine means having the nature of, or the being of a deity. The nature of or being of a deity. It's something that emanates or expresses itself through deity. It's sacred. It's superhuman, godlike, supreme, good, extremely pleasant. Some people just say God, but you can say an underlying creative and sustaining force in the universe. Everything connected with, coming from, or caused by God, that's divine. Everything connected with, coming from, or caused by God, that's divine. Divine. So when I say divine, the divine season of the pandemic, I'm talking about the fact that this thing originated from God. Well, we're going to cast this devil out of this thing, and we're going to bring this thing back to the pits of hell. What is you talking about? What is you talking about? What you better do is go mask up. That's what you better do. You better go put some gloves on. That's what you need to do. Because you're kind of sounding a little cuckoo right now. All of this, we've had people cast this devil out. You know what I have a problem with? And we're gonna go on this here. I have a problem with all of these religious people, especially the so-called church, especially those in Christendom. You're casting out every devil relating to this virus. And the sad part about it is, well, let me say this here first. I'm not going to say that yet. I'm going to walk into that right now. You're calling everything a devil and binding everything that you see as a devil, but you've yet to bind Donald Trump. You've yet to bind his words and his behavior. You're binding and loosen everything onto the earth, but you won't bind and loose nothing into Donald Trump. Why don't you loose some love in his heart? Why don't you loosen some honesty in his integrity, or in his lack of integrity thereof? Why don't you give him some standards and some principles? Oh my goodness, God. Why do I have to say all of this? Because I must, and I never intended to, but I must speak forth. One of the first messages I put out on the podcasting sites is the message that truth must prevail. I've been speaking since last year that truth must prevail. Truth must prevail. I believe that message may have been one of my last messages, though it's listed as one of my first messages. Truth must prevail. It was the night of that when they were trying to impeach him, and then the impeachment was shot down. It didn't work. It didn't happen. He was impeached, but they did not convict him of impeachment. So he walked through that one, or he walked free of that one, which was how it was divinely set up to happen. But that was probably the last message. But truth must prevail spoke regarding how truth must prevail no matter what we're seeing. Truth must prevail. Donald Trump must be confronted with the truth. That is a big part of what this pandemic season is about. And my problem is the church world has bound or attempted to bound, so-called bound, everything except Donald. You bound the people protesting. You bound the people that's living in poverty, living beneath what you feel they should be. Not what God feels they should be, but what you in that Bible feels they should be. As though the divine hand of God is not working in and through them and all that as well. You box God in and then you bind everything else up. Why don't you try it, since the pandemic has not bound anything, since the pandemic is still running loose and wild, why don't you try binding something else or somebody else, like what's going on in politics, like what's going on with these police officers hurting and killing so many people? Why don't you church folk bind them? Why don't you Christians stand up and come against that? Why do you bind everything except the right thing? Maybe that's why it's not working. I believe there are greater reasons why it's not working. The greater reason why it's not working because it was never designed to work. That's in your perception. That's in your concept of things. Neither your perception nor your concept controls the universe, not necessarily. Your twisted perception and your twisted concepts will create energy that will go forth in the universe, and the universe will respond. But how the universe responds, you do not determine. Your energy just creates a response, but how the universe responds, you know not how. Look at Joseph's brothers. They set up a motive and an intention toward Joseph. They set forth energy to bind him and wanted to kill him, but the universe or God would not permit them to. Yet they were able to bind him and put him in a well, and then he was eventually sold off, I think, to distant cousins or whatever, into Egypt. Their energy created movement and created a response in the universe, but their energy did not produce the effects that they desired, because you don't determine how the universe responds. Joseph ended up being at the top of the food chain, and he began to help those in the world at that time who came to Egypt for their substance, which ended up putting him in a place for his father and his brothers. They never intended that with the energy that they sowed against Joseph. But the universe did respond, but it didn't respond how they wanted it to. Why? Because you don't get to respond, or you don't get to create the response of the universe. You only get to sow the seed into the universe. Judah sowed the seed into the universe regarding Jesus, yet Judas didn't get to determine the response of the universe toward the death of Jesus. If indeed all of that storyline was true, let's suppose that it is true. Let's suppose that it is. Judas still didn't get to choose what became of Jesus. God already had that chosen. But Judas did have to sow the energy. Jesus said, Judas, go sow your energy into the universe. Do what you're here to do. Go do it. Make it happen. Make it happen quick. Get it. Left, right. If you don't understand that. All right. Divine deity. Season. A season is any definite or indefinite period. May I tell you, jumping ahead of things, may I tell you that God has moved us into a season, into a definite period of time on his time chart, but an indefinite period of time in time on our time chart. Why do I say that there? I will go into detail as we continue forward, but God stated to me that this will be an indefinite, a long, extended period. This pandemic season will not be short in the least bit. God said to me that this will be a very long period. I'm not going to just be saying what God said to me. I'm going to read things to you all, and I'm going to cover as much as I possibly can in these recordings. Why don't you all use them as teaching lessons and moments with God as you hear them? Don't look at them hear them as a burden, but read them as a teaching toward the greater things of God. The substance of what I will be included in all of this will be helpful even beyond this pandemic period. The substance that I will be speaking regarding, I will have a lot of sidebar conversations. A sidebar conversation is what lawyers tend to have with the judge or with each other. They go to the sidebar, try to turn away from the microphone, and they speak amongst themselves. Even though I'm going to be speaking to you all, I'm going to have a lot of sidebar conversations that are like additions or extras or nuggets, just nuggets that I'm going to add in there that's going to help you even outside of the pandemic period, if I can say it that way, because everything is inside of the pandemic period. Everything leading up to the pandemic period was inside of the pandemic period. But the season that we're in is an indefinite period. The word season means a period of time, a period in time, a period of unspecified length. We always want to say a season is 40 years, a season is whatever. It's really an unspecified length. We try to use that. Well, the children of Israel and Moses was on the backside of the desert for a season, 40 years. Moses was in Egypt for a season, 40 years. The children of Israel wandered through the desert, 40 years. Jesus was 40 days. Was it 40 days and 40 nights or whatever? There's the 40 again. We talk about season, and we want to say it's all 40. I'm not putting God in a box. But the English definition of the word season is a period of an unspecified period in time. An unspecified period in time. That's where we are. We're in an unspecified period of time. Okay. It's the appropriate timing for a thing. The season that we are in is the appropriate timing for what we are facing right now. This is not a wrong timing. I know it messed up your timing. It messed up your calendar. It messed up your clock. It messed up your plan. It messed up your schooling. It messed up your job hunt. It messed up your finances. It messed up your 401k. It messed up everything you ever invested in. But it is what it is. It's an appropriate time for something. That's what a season is. It's a specific length in time that is characterized by the occurrence of certain conditions or events. Everything that we're experiencing right now was set up by the conditions that were in existence prior to this here. Everything that's happening in the church is due to the setup that was occurring all the years prior to where we are right now. Everything that you see in the legal system that's going awry and happening right now, all of that was set up. It was a set of situations and circumstances that were put in place prior to the pandemic. All of these things are not just occurrences, just hapstance occurrences. These were things that were being worked into where we are right now today. The events that we are experiencing today are because of the seasons prior to this that brought us into this period in time. So a season is a span that is designated for a given activity. There are so many activities that will go on in this season, and I'm going to begin to speak on them. But the reason why these activities are going on is not because they're just happening out of nowhere. No, they were designed. Everything was designated to happen. There was a designated period in time for all of this to come into existence or come into the light of its long time existence. None of this stuff is just coming out of nowhere. Most of it was already present. Just the knowledge of it wasn't. The acknowledgement of it wasn't. But now we're in that point. We're at that point. We're at that state. We're in that specific lengthy period in time that was designated to bring all things to the light. So when you hear me talk about the divine, the hand of God in this season, the divine season, the hand of God in this period of time that we're in, don't see this season as a summer, spring, winter, or fall. Think about it. This is not going to be the length. And I knew this from the beginning. It was just in me. I knew that this season was not going to be a summer, winter, spring, or fall. Why? It was just evident. I understood. I saw God working some things years in advance, but I did not know how all of that was going to come about. If you hear people who are in tune with their spirituality and they're in tune to the universal workings of God, and if they're in tune to the heart and the beat of God, they'll say the same. They'll even add a few more things to it, even beyond me. However, I understood that this season, when God began to speak to me about it being a season, I knew it wasn't going to be like a summer, spring, winter, fall. Now, how do you know that what I believed and what I'm saying now is true, that this is not just going to be a summer, spring, winter, fall season, it'll be over? Well, it started technically last fall. And now we've gone through the fall. We've gone through the spring. We've gone through the summer. We're back into the fall again. Well, actually, we went to the fall. The fall, winter of 2019, and then the spring of 2020. And we've just completed the summer of 2020. And now we're in the spring. No, we're in the fall again of 2020, and we're going into the winter. So we've already gone through multiple seasons already, and the pandemic hadn't even picked up its momentum yet. It hadn't even moved into second gear yet, or maybe it's in second gear, but it still has third, fourth, and fifth gear to get to before it starts cruising, not breaking back down, but cruising at that speed that fifth gear puts it in. The divine season of the pandemic, the word pandemic, none of us ever really, most of us never really, I don't like to use the word tons, because that's, there's tons of bread in there because there's 2 loaves of bread. There's tons of bread, a ton. Each ton is 2,000 pounds. There's at least 4,000 pounds of bread in the kitchen. Well, how's there any room for me to go in the kitchen to get the bread? I mean, all the space is gone from the tons of bread that you claim are in there. It's just it's wrong terminology. It lies. It misleads. When I say all of us should know, no, we all should not know this word. I've probably heard the word pandemic somewhere. I never really tried to understand what it meant because we weren't, it just was not necessary. But God, God began to use the word pandemic with me. However, the terminology itself, I was enlightened by the terminology through hearing it on the news, pandemic, looking it up in the dictionary. But the word pandemic simply means existing everywhere. The divine pandemic, existing everywhere. The divine season of the pandemic. The divine season where everyone is in step everywhere. Everyone is included in the heartbeat of God everywhere. Existing everywhere. So pervasive and all-inclusive as to exist in or affect the whole world. A pandemic is something that is widespread. It's spread over a wide geographic area and affecting a large portion of the population. We understand that there are multiple millions and millions of people who have been infected, who have been affected by this virus. We know that now, as of today, September the 29th, we have over 1 million people who have died worldwide, and we have well over over 200,000 who in the United States who have died as a result. I will speak on the deaths and all of that as we proceed further. But a pandemic is a disease affecting persons over a wide geographical area, extensively epidemic. Something that's epidemic is not as, it's more community. It's more dealing with a population or a particular region. But a pandemic is multiple epidemics. It's affecting multiple, but a pandemic is even greater than that. It's something that affects the world. A pandemic is an epidemic that spreads over a very, very wide area, such as a whole country, a whole continent, occurring throughout a region or even throughout the world. Anything such as a disease or something that's resembling a disease that attacks or affects many individuals in a community or population simultaneously. Everything that we are experiencing in this divine movement that God is orchestrating is in line simultaneously everywhere throughout the world. I'll go on to explain it later. A pandemic is just simply an epidemic that is spread over multiple countries or continents. Okay. So this pandemic, this divine season of the pandemic, where the divinity of God, the workings of God, the hand of God is at work everywhere simultaneously at one point in time period, not as though he was not everywhere and working everywhere prior to this year, but it has never been where we can witness it and see it and grasp it as now with this pandemic. They said the other pandemic that came close to this here, or that this is coming close to, is the pandemic of 1918. I won't get involved in all of that. But when I understood that we were in this season, God began to talk to me again, like in February of 2020 and March 2020, February the 26th. He started saying to me, I'm going to use you like you've never been used before, and you're gonna be reached, and people are going to reach out to you for what I'm giving you. He said, I've given you something different. Now, I'm not understanding what God is saying. I'm thinking he's talking about my personal ministry and whatever else. Again, I don't like to use the term ministry, but that's what I'll use right now. And he said, your messages will be unique. You know, your approach is going to be unique. Your message is going to have a twist that is unique to you. So I'm just listening to what he's saying, and I'm writing it down. I'm always writing down. I have books and books of where God has spoken to me throughout the years. I mean, I'm talking about so many books that we don't even have space in our closets. Even in my studio, I don't have space for everything. So now I'm not even able to print stuff up. I'm now just keeping stuff in digital form because I have too much of what God has spoken to me. He told me that your content is going to be different because your purpose is different. And I'm listening to God and I'm not fully understanding what he's saying. And he says, look, all of your experiences have brought you to this point. Now, this is February the 26th. I'm still not understanding. He said, your experiences have formed your beliefs. And I understand that my experiences have formed my belief, but I never really took thought of it. But I can understand how my experiences formed my beliefs. And he said, believe that your experiences were ordained of me. Okay, now I'm not understanding that God is setting all of our experiences up. And all of our experiences, no matter how heinous they may seem, are ordained of him. And I'm definitely not understanding that he's walking me into this pandemic period that I had no idea of. Sure, like I said, somewhere in December or January, I heard something about some kind of virus or disease or sickness that was somewhere, I want to say in China, but I remember hearing it just in the backdrop of me listening to news. I wasn't paying no attention to it. It didn't have no effect on me, so I thought. So I just kept living. He was telling me these things that I didn't understand. And he says, your experiences were your teachers. My experiences were my teachers. Okay, I won't get too far into that because those are nuggets, those side pocket nuggets, those side pocket conversations, those sidebar conversations that I could throw stuff in there, but I don't want to get too far off what I'm saying. He began to tell me, listen to your experiences. Not that I wasn't listening to my experiences, but I'm sure he's saying, listen to them. Listen, you don't hear the experience that you're already in. You don't hear what is coming down the pipe right now. You don't understand it. Listen to your experiences. Listen to what your experiences were there to teach you. Listen to them. Pay attention to your experiences. And I'm still not understanding him. Then he says, your experiences were predetermined. Your experiences have accomplished what they were destined to accomplish. You are walking in the accomplishments of your experiences, and I'm still not understanding. What are you saying to me? Your experiences have shaped your teachings, your message. You know, he's saying he just keeps saying to me, your message is going to be different, and it's supposed to be different, and you have to embrace the difference. Then he began to say to me, and listen to what he said to me on February the 26th. Now, I've been talking right now from February the 26th, but I'm going to read this literally now. Listen to what God said to me. I did not understand what was coming. There is a change. There is a change that is occurring. Things will not be the same. God knows I didn't know what God was talking about. I'm thinking my personal life. People will not hear the same. I did not realize what God was saying to me. People will not react the same. People will not approach the same. The way that people hear will not be the same. People are shifting. People are moving. People are searching. People are inquiring, and people are requiring something different. Man, I'm just thinking God is telling me, natural occurrences are coming about within the hearts and minds of people. And I didn't understand what he was saying. When God began to use that word shift, I didn't understand. And this is what he said. The shift. Now, God didn't talk to me in shift terms. The shift that is occurring is of me. The shift that is occurring is of me. I don't know what God is talking about. I don't know nothing he's talking about. I'm just riding with it. People are shifting. Okay. The shift that is occurring is of me. I am shifting people. I am changing people's approach. I am changing people's mindset. People's minds are changing. People's desires are shifting. People's approach is shifting. I did not know, what is this shift? Well, let me give you the English definition of the word shift. Now, of course, some people know this here. Some people probably already had this in their category, in their vocabulary. Now, understand this here. One thing about me, I like to look up the words, the simple words that God says to me, because if he's taking the time to speak those simple terms to me, there must be something in those terms that I have not attained, and I need to understand what God is actually saying, because the revelation in what God is saying is in the simple terminology that God uses. So we have speakers and preachers and teachers who want to speak so articulately that they lose the people, but, it causes light to be shown upon them. I'm not trying to be in the light of anything. I just want to shed light on everything that God gives me at least, or at the least. The word shift is a limited, often assigned period of activity, duty, or opportunity. It's the process or the result of changing from one appearance, from one state, or from one phase to another. It's the process or result of changing from one form, state, or phase to another. To shift means to get rid of, S-H-I-F-T. To get rid of, to exchange one thing for another of the same class. I beg to differ, a different class, but it says the definition is the same class. It's to move or transfer from one place or position to another. It means to alter or to change gears. God is altering. God is changing gears. No devil is doing this. No Satan from some place so-called hell is orchestrating this. This did not originate from Satan, and this did not originate from hell. It's to change gears. It's to change position. It's to change direction or place or form. It's a change in direction. That's what a shift is. A change in direction. The direction that we were heading was so messy, so messed up, so twisted, so unjust. It's a change in attitude. That's what the shift is. It's judgment. A change in how we judge things. A change in how things are judged. It's a change in emphasis. We've emphasized too much on the minors and we've ignored the majors. To shift means to alter the settled state or position of a thing. We became settled in racism. We became settled in inequality. We became settled with police officers killing people. We became settled in how the church dogs people out and steps on everything and everybody. We became settled with these preachers who are full of nothing but game and street wits of stupidity and greed. We became settled with slaves, obey your master. Don't seek to be loose. Even though the preacher preaches in the same breath, in the same message, that whosoever the Lord makes free or sets free is free indeed. Well, if I'm free indeed, why are you telling me to stay bound to the slave? We became settled in being slaves. We became settled in being church slaves. We became settled in being economic slaves. We became settled to being political slaves. We became settled to being church slaves, religious slaves. We became settled in all of that, and God had to bring a shift that was already designed. To shift means to leave or discard for another, to give up this for something greater, to give up in return for something else, to move somebody or something to a different position or to be moved to a different position, to change or exchange something for something else. The shifting that God has been talking to me about is the act of moving from one place to another. The act where God is changing our locations, both spiritually, mentally, physically, socially, economically, politically, and in whatever other arena that includes systems. It's continuously varying, changing position or direction. God is shifting us. So when God was talking to me about this shifting, I knew not what God was speaking about. Okay, I understood the terminology after looking up the word, but I did not understand what God was doing in the midst of him telling me this here. So to go on with what God was saying to me on the 26th of February, God said, the shift that is occurring is of me. Okay, I'm not even questioning the shift that is occurring of me. I'm just writing it down, because many times God told me in the past, he said, listen, he said, you don't have to understand me to write it down. You don't have to understand me to believe it. You just have to write it down until you believe it. You don't have to understand it in order to record it. He said, the shift that is occurring is of me. I am shifting people. I am changing people's approach. I am changing people's mindset. People's minds are changing. People's desires are shifting. People's approach is shifting. Then he says, you are in the direction of the shift. I'm in the direction of the shift. I don't even know what the shift is, God, but I'm in the direction of it. Okay. You are going along the direction of the shift. Good. I'm not going against it. But I didn't know. I was just doing what I knew to do. You are going with the shift. I'm going with the shift that I don't even see. The shift is in your direction. The shift is in your direction. Well, thank God for that. Still didn't know what he was talking about. The shift is going in the direction that you are going. Well, good. Thank you, God. You are going in a new direction. Well, thank you, God. Something is changing in my life, because at this time period, I was going through a whole hell of a lot. You are going to be where you were used to being. I'm sorry. You are not going to be where you were used to being. I'm not going to be where I was used to being. I did not know that we were moving into a pandemic season. In fact, I did not know that we had already transitioned into a pandemic season before most, if any of us, even knew that we had shifted. We had already shifted into a pandemic season. Remember, the word pandemic means worldwide. He says, you're going in a new direction. So I'm thinking he's talking about me, but he's talking about the world. You are not going to be where you used to be. Well, we know that he must be talking to the world, because now we all realize that we are not where we used to be. And we're not going to be back where we used to be, never, ever again. Whether you want to believe it or not, we're not. You are not going in the direction of where you used to be. Now, God is also talking to me personally, okay? Because one of the places that I was involved in church heavily. I was involved in ministry heavily. And God was saying to me, but he was saying to me in the midst of saying to the world, just like he had some of his prophets of old walk out the very things that he was telling them about the people. He had them mimic the very things that he was going to do to his people. He caused them to walk through that. Notice how Moses went and lived on the backside of the desert for 40 years. And then he ended up with the children of Israel going into the promise. He lived in the desert for 40 years. So before he walked out his purpose, he had to walk in his purpose. Or you can say before he walked in his purpose, he had to walk out his purpose. He had to experience 40 years of the desert to be able to appreciate and bring others through 40 years in the desert. Isn't that something? How God will cause you to walk through the very things he's telling you to speak to others about. So when God was telling me you're going in a new direction, he was telling me the world was going in a new direction. I didn't understand it at the time. I'm just foresighting right now. You are not going to be where you used to be. You're not going in the direction of where you used to be. You are not going in the direction of where you used to be. Whenever God tells me something twice, 3 times, I know something. He's trying to say something to me. He said that to me 3 times. Your direction is different. Where the shift is taking you is different from where you've been. You're not going to be where others have been. Do not look for those you have been with to get with you. Oh, Lord. When God started telling you, don't look for everybody to get with you. Don't look for them to get with you. Don't look for this person to get with you. You might as well buckle down, because you're getting ready to go on a wild cowboy ride with God. You're getting ready to go through some rough terrain, and people aren't going to get with the program as it relates to what God is doing in your life. So God was telling me this here. And notice how in the shift that is occurring right now, the divine shift that is occurring in this in this pandemic, in the person of this pandemic, how people are not agreeing with the direction of where everything is going. Where the shift is taking you is different from where you've been. Okay? Do not look for them to get with the shift. The shift is where I am taking you. The shift is in the direction that you are to take. Do not concern yourself with who goes with the shift. Do not concern yourself with who goes with the shift. Do you know that's what the problem is now? We're concerned with who's not going with the shift that's happening, that we're getting lost in the shift. I think maybe that, in the Bible, how in Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot's wife, it seems as though she was more concerned with who was not coming with them as they were running out of Sodom and Gomorrah. She looked back and seemed to be more concerned with whatever was there. In Jesus' time, when he was walking in ministry and one of the disciples wanted to follow him, or whatever the guy was, he was saying, well, Jesus, I gotta go back home, and I'm concerned about my dead daddy. My family member died, and I need to go back home. And he said, look, no. See, what you need to do is you need to basically take up your cross and follow me. You need to go with me. Let the dead do what the dead does. You need to follow me. Not be so concerned with who's going with the shift. You just make sure that you go with the shift. Not concerned who's wearing the mask, but you just make sure you wear the mask. Not so concerned about who believes in this pandemic season that it's not a hoax. You just believe that it's not a hoax. Not that you have to believe those who say that it's the devil and God has nothing to do with this here. You just believe that this is greater than a devil. There is divinity in this here. So you can't concern yourself with who goes with the shift. That's what God was saying to me. What is he saying to you? Okay, do not worry about who either goes or does not go with the shift. You just go with the shift. Do not worry about who does not agree with the shift. You just agree with the shift. And this is where we are right now today. I'm not understanding that God is talking to me about the season that we had dispensationed ourselves to, or he had dispensationed us into. Not understanding this. Know that the shift is for you. Know that you are for the shift. See, the shift that we're in, God said, know that the shift is for you. Stop thinking that the shift is against you. Stop thinking that wearing masks and cleaning your nasty hands is against you. Stop being concerned about the fact that wearing gloves in the grocery store before you grab those shopping carts and before you grab those doors is beneath you and it's against you. No one's trying to stifle you. No one but God. No one's trying to shut you up. No one but God. No one's trying to hold you back from whatever it is that you're wanting to do. No one but God. God is working in all of this. And he says, know that the shift is for you. This shift isn't against us. It's against what we want to do. It's against what we're used to. But this was a divine shift that God was telling me in February. He said, know that the shift is for you. Know that you are for the shift. Know that you are in the shift. Know that you are in. Listen, anyone who's living and who has not been taken out thus far. Oh, I don't know if I should say it like that. What I'll say to it is this. You will know in your heart whether you're in this shift. To what point you're in this shift, I'm not sure. If you're living, you're in this shift. Yet at the same time, there are many living who won't be in this shift. They won't complete this shift. They're being forced to go in the direction of the shift, but they're reluctant towards the direction of the shift. Many of those people will die off during the process of this shifting. Many people will die of this virus. Many people will die of the civil unrest and the civil violence, the civil war type settings that will come about. I will speak to you about all of this as we go on. You want to hear every message. Trust me, I have words upon words upon words, words that you hadn't heard on the internet. Words that you're not going to hear on the internet, not necessarily. Well, you'll hear them now because I'll be out there. But people outside of me doesn't mean that people don't have what I have somewhere. But the chances of you coming across those people, man, you got to cross a bunch of bull crap to even get to hear a piece of something that someone might be saying that's in accordance to the heartbeat of God. Trust me, people are talking from their nightmares. They're talking from their heartburn. They're talking from their scary, spooky messages and all the movies that they've looked at throughout the history of their life. They're talking all that nonsense of the rapture and all of this crazy stuff, the end of the end. There's the end, but not the end of how we're thinking the end is. Anyway, know that the shift is for you. Know that you are for the shift. This is what God is saying. Know that you are in the shift. Know that you are speaking to those who are in the shift. If you hear my voice, more likely than not, most likely than not, you are hearing it because you are in the shift. God has included you in the shift. Know that you are to speak to those who are in the shift. This is what God was saying to me. You are to speak to those who are in the shift. Those of you, you're going to have to speak to those who are in the shift. You're going to say, well, how do I know who's in the shift? Well, if they're living Perhaps they are in the shift. We really don't fully know who's all in the shift. We just have to speak forth, and those who are in the shift will hear it. Those who will complete the shift will hear it. Understand that bishops have not completed this shift. That bishops and pastors and whatever their rank is in the church didn't even go with this shift, didn't complete this shift. They completed the dispensational period that they were in, but they didn't go into this shift and go through this shift. They wouldn't have accepted this shift, many of them anyway, right? They wouldn't have called it a shift. They would have taken the F out of shift and they would have called it something different. Now you stop taking that F out, that word. You know what you left with. Know that the people who are in the shift need to hear from you. This is what God is telling me. The people who are in the shift need to hear what I have to say. You are a voice to those who are in the shift. You are to speak to those who are in the shift. Your voice will reach them. Your voice will reach those who are in the shift. The question is, at this point, is my voice reaching you? Well, if not, just hold on and wait a minute and let me put some more words in it on other recordings in regards or in relation to this period that I'm talking about, this period that we're living in, and then answer that question if you're not there already. God told me to speak to the hearers. I'm not understanding what God is saying to me. I'm thinking God is just talking to me. I'm still not putting no pandemic period together. Speak to the ones who are there to hear. Speak to them and speak to the ones who are supposed to hear you. Now I'm like, well, I don't know who's supposed to hear me, but God, I just talk. He said, I understand that you want certain ones to hear you because see, I wanted church folk to hear me. I wanted my pastor for so many years, only one guy that I can truly call my pastor in the stages and phases of my older stage in life, from my 20s on up. I only had one true one, and I only appreciated him. And I wanted him to hear me, but I didn't know where he was. And I still don't know where he is, though I see some telltales, but still I can't tell. Okay. So I just leave it at that. So I'm like, God, I want certain people to hear me. I'm saying this in my heart. If you know anything about conversing with God is not about all that you're speaking as much as it is all that he's speaking. But in conversing with God, it's not about you opening your mouth and speaking. In the spirit realm, in the realm of spiritual, it's not about words. Spoken words. Why? It takes too long to speak a word. And when you speak a word, you become tone deaf yourself. So speaking with God is really a quiet thing. You can say more words in the spirit realm than you can ever say in the physical realm. So speaking with God is really about thought. So in my speaking and in my typing what God is telling me, I'm just typing what God is telling me, because that's all I ever do. I'm just typing what God is telling me. I'm just typing what he's telling me. And God is telling me about this stuff. And I'm just flowing with it. Yet at the same time, quick segments of me is saying, but God, well, I want to be able to tell my people. I want to be able to tell the church. I don't know what it is I'm supposed to tell them, but I want to include them in what you're doing with me. And this is where God said, your message can only be heard by those who are going with the shift. He said, I understand that you want certain ones to hear you. And let me stop right there and say this here. I know we've been on now for 59 minutes and some seconds. I want to keep these at an hour, but I'm going to have to go over a little bit because I want to finish this particular area, because this area is called the shift. Okay. The next message will be called the flow within the shift, but this is the shift. All right. So this is the shift. I want to finish this here. I only have a little bit more to go, but I want to finish this here before I move on to the next one. And I'm going to go a little over an hour, but bear with me. Many of your lives depend on what I might say. You will be amazed at how intertwined we all are with each other, how our words are there to impact each other in such a life-breathing way. Okay, he said, I understand that you want certain ones to hear you, and I understand that you want certain ones to receive you. He said, I understand that you want certain ones to approve of you. But you have to understand that only the ones who are going with the shift will be able to hear and approve of you. He said, your message can only be heard by those who are going with the shift. Those who are not going with the shift cannot hear you. They won't hear you. But those who are going with the shift will hear you. They'll hear you and they'll listen to what you're saying. What has been will not be. I'm not understanding what God is telling me. This is February 26th. I don't know nothing about this pandemic thing. What has been will not be. What is will not continue. What has been will not be. What is will not continue. What is will not remain. What are you saying, God? But I'm just typing it. The shift is occurring. And I'm like, the shift is occurring. Now, I know if I take the F out of shift, I know that that was occurring. But he said the shift is occurring. The change is taking place. Now, I don't know what change God is talking about. The way things have been will not continue to be. I am shifting the way that things have been. God, I'm not understanding you. I am shifting the way that things have been presented. Lord, what are you saying? I am shifting people's focus. I am shifting people's perception. I am shifting people's concept. Lord, I'm shifting their focus. I'm shifting their perception. I'm shifting their concept. People's concepts are changing. People's perceptions are shifting. People are shifting from the concepts of old. I didn't understand what God was saying. All that we knew, all that we conceived, all that we preconceived, all that we perceived, all of our past perceptions, all that we were once focused on is being changed, even within the church. And I didn't understand what God was saying. People are shifting from the concepts of past generations. Oh my goodness. The generational flow of the past will not flow with the directional flow of the present. The generational flow of the past will not flow with the directional flow of the present. No wonder we have so many people going on, moving on. So many people within the church arena going on, moving on. Their dispensational periods in time are up and they're gone. God is moving us into a dispensation without Moses. Instead of Caleb, one Caleb, we got probably millions or hundreds or thousands of Calebs, however you want to perceive that, however you want to perceive the world to be in size. The present flow will not consist of the generational flow of the past. This is what God was telling me. The flow of the present is flowing right past the flow of the past. God said the flow of the present is flowing right past the flow of the past. The new flow that we're in, and I'll talk about the flow as we go on, the new flow of the present, the flow and the shift kind of go together. The shift happens and then the flow takes us in the direction of the shift. But the flow of the present is flowing right past the flow of the past. People will no longer flow in the flow of the past. Oh, so we won't be living like we once lived. We won't be taking like we once take. We won't be accepting bullets like we once accepted. We won't be accepting having knees being put in our necks to the point of death. We won't be accepting that anymore. We won't be accepting the status quo of politics. We won't be accepting what we once accepted in the first election of Trump. We won't accept that in the second one. Oh, my goodness, we won't accept what preachers been saying all these years that we knew within us were not right. We won't accept the direction that the church is taking us. We won't accept the systematic approach of the church to the black man anymore, to the black race anymore. We won't even accept the position that the church has in the community or once had within our communities any longer. Oh, is that what that means? I didn't understand that at the time. People will no longer flow in the flow of the past. People will no longer seek the flow of generations past. People will let dead things die. Let dead things die. That's what we're in. That's the season we're in. Okay, I have 3 more small paragraphs right here, and I'm finished with this here. People will no longer seek out the things of the past. People will begin to flow in the things of the present flow. You are in the present flow. People, I'm here to tell you, we are now in a present flow. We are in a new flow. You are in the direction of the present flow. You will not bring the things of old along with you in this present flow. You will not flow in the things of old in this new flow. You all, whatever you thought was going to be or continue to be, will not be. Whatever you were feeling in your spirit that things had to change, they will change. They are changing. God told me on June 3rd, right after George Floyd, oh, things have changed. Do not think that this is a period that is not ordained. Don't think that this is a period where people rise up and then they go back and sit down somewhere in their holes. No. God said this is a period of change. But that goes along with the word shift, how it all ties together. But I won't jump all the way to June 3rd because I got so much to tell you about the month of March. I have so much to tell you about what God said in the month of April and in the month of June. I think maybe 1 or 2 times he spoke to me in May, but June, July, and August, God really poured to me, even September. But anyway, I want you all to hear this, and I have it, but I'll read these last few things. Trust that you are in the flow. I'm reading what God said to me. Trust that the flow, or trust the flow that you're in. I'm saying this to you all. Trust this flow. Do not seek the flow of old. Do not seek to flow with those of old. You have been removed from the flow of old. You have been removed from the people of old. Do not seek to reconnect. Do not seek approval. Do not seek acceptance. Whoever is to accept you will accept you. Whoever will approve of you will approve of you. But you don't seek to go back to that which has been lost, has been severed. We've been cut away from a lot, people. This pandemic season has ushered us into a new period, and I'm going to explain to you the period that we're in. And guess what? It's not going to cost you a penny. There are some people out here there who I agree with, 1 or 2, that's it, that I agree with in regards to this pandemic season. Yet at the same time, I disagree with some things, not things that they're saying necessarily, but things that accompany what they're saying. And I don't know how to deal with that. That's not the direction that God is taking me. I'm going to leave it at that. Listen, these recordings are free to you. They're out there. If you choose to do something toward anything, that's fine. But I'm not asking for anything. I want you to hear the truth. And I'm not charging you for the truth. Because too many years I wanted to hear truth. But I could not afford to get the tapes, the recordings from these different ministries, whether it was from the Copeland ministries or the Dollar ministries or the Duplantis. I don't know if I ever wanted Duplantis tapes or whatever. I get tired of all that crazy laughing. And, most of it is corny anyway. And most of it is the same jokes he's been telling ever since I've known him. So I ain't, Jesse, do your thing. I'm just telling you how, you ain't asked how I feel, but I just telling you, just throw it away. Don't worry about it. But anyway, I'm just saying what I say, and I couldn't afford the Jake's tapes, and I couldn't afford the Joyce Myers tapes, and I couldn't afford those people. But I thank God that I couldn't afford them. You know why? Because God gave me revelation that far exceeded where they were teaching and where they're still stuck at. Many of those people, many of them are still stuck at. And I thank God for being able to hear his voice and him being able to talk to me and lead me and guide me into the truth regarding him, and not be caught up on regurgitating things of history's past, things of centuries past, all of this crazy stuff that people believed 100, 200, 300 years ago that people of today, instead of going into greater revelations, into the deeper things of God, meatier things in God, they want to stay back with the Wigglesworth and the Hagins and all of these people of the past. And, and there's a problem with that, people. Even if those people were here, if they were truly in the heartbeat of God, they would have moved further on than where they were. And we're here preaching them, instead of going into our dispensational truths, the truths that are in the dispensational periods that we're in, that were not in their dispensational periods. But anyway, there's going to be a lot of talk in this here because I got a lot to tell you about God. Most of what I'm going to tell you, probably 80% of what I'm going to tell you, if not 90%, is going to be exactly what God told me. Well, actually, most of it is going to be what God told me. I'll leave a 10 to 15% margin of error there because I may say some things that God didn't tell me. I may tell you something about a Gatorade that's sitting on my desk or some ginger drink that's sitting on my desk. God didn't tell me that. So I'll leave margin of a marginal degree of error for those moments that I will veer off and say some things. But anyway, for the most part, these teachings, really all of my teachings have to do with what God told me. I teach from what God has spoken to me. Understand this here. I can give you verses to everything that I'm saying to you for the most part. I can give you verses. I can go in Jeremiah. I can go into Isaiah. I can go into Ezekiel and I can lay it down. I can go into Hosea. I can go into Joel and Amos. I can go into Micah. I can definitely go into Malachi. I can go into Haggai. I can really go down. I can hit them, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to drown you with that. I'm going to talk to you and let your spiritual quest feed you scriptural backgrounds to what I'm saying. But you know what? I don't limit what God is saying based upon scripture. If you limit it to scripture, you've already boxed God in. If you limit it to scripture, you already boxed him in. If you limit the teachings of Jesus to a book, you've also boxed God in already if Jesus is supposed to be God. Why? Because Jesus didn't necessarily speak for us to write a book about him. That's why John said, I suppose that the world itself couldn't contain all the books that would be needed if you're going to talk about Jesus in a book or talk about God in a book. Jesus, they're greater than a book. One book is not going to give it all to you. That's when I'm not looking for one book to explain it all. Excuse me. Every now and then you might hear me do that, but it's because I'm hitting the balancer of my mic by my hand, and I hate doing that, but it is what it is. Maybe if I had better compressors, I do have compression on my recording, but if I had better compressors, you probably wouldn't hear it as much. But being that it's connected to the mic, anything I do, you will hear it into the mic. Excuse me, when you hear me do that, you just know what it is when I do it. Okay, I'm finished with this one. We're going into another one. You will appreciate what I'm going to come forth with. I'm edging you into this here. Again, I say this stuff is so crisp and so meaty and so thorough. What God spoke to me. You will not be in the blue. 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 God spoke to me clearly, and I see it all coming to pass. But just because God spoke it to me clearly, I need to be able to break it down and speak it in a way that those who hear me can hear it clearly, because you don't have the background experiences that I had that makes me hear as keenly as I do. I have to give it to those who are not familiar with certain things, or to those who are familiar with certain things, but they've come to a point in their life they're saying, like I said, God, honestly, I don't know nothing. because every time I think I know everything, I don't know nothing. So God, teach me all over again. Maybe that's who God is using me. That's why God is using me in your life, to teach you all over again. I am not sure, but whoever I'm speaking to, because right now I am speaking to a blind audience. I don't know who I'm speaking to. I'm just speaking from the depths of my heart regarding what God shared with me. And I should hope to God that you walk with me in every one of these recordings. I won't hold you any longer. I appreciate you listening to me. I really do. Those of you who do listen, I appreciate you listening. Please listen to these recordings. These recordings, we're going into a dangerous period. You need to hear these recordings. I thank you. And that's only for those who need to hear them. Whoever you are, you determine, you ask God, you let God lead you into what you are to hear in this season. I appreciate you. And I'll talk with you on the next one.